statue. Ignore the Brown statue by 4 causes. This is the basis of Western science. Ignore the bronze by the material cause. What is the statue made for? Ignore the bronze by the formal cause, the statue, the shape of the statue and the component of the statue. Ignore the statue by the efficient cause, the primary source of change of rest, that is the artisan, the art of bronze casting. And the final and the most important cause, telos, the end, that for the sake of which a thing is done, what it is used for. Remember this? This is a kind of, this is telic. What is used for? Plants are used for these purposes. These are the parts of the plant. And these are actually not exactly in the Aristotelian, but similarly, these are describing the typical event that we experience with plant. The plants fall, leaves fall, and the fragrance of the flowers, etc. These are the events that we learn, we have to ascribe from our experience to the plants. So what we see here, sorry, I should have, I skipped that already. So basically, our study shows that the Chinese character system is a qualia-based system of knowledge system. And this is why any language not related to Chinese, as Japanese, Vietnamese, Korean, they adopt Chinese writing with no problem, because you are based on the same qualia. I'm giving a few qualia. Think about the radical of mouth. Think about if you're using the scientific description of mouth, how many elements are there as part of the mouth, or a kind of mouth? Nothing much you can do. But mouth is described and defined in Suowenjie, the first dictionary of Chinese, that which one speaks with, that which one eats with. The function of mouth, most importantly, are eating and speaking. So what would you expect of the characters, the writing system, underneath the basic concept of mouth? You have a very small subset here involving the parts of the mouth. The majority of it, 2 huge groups, hundreds of characters, not hundreds, I'm saying, tens of characters. It's about eating and it's about speaking. And this is how concepts are organized. This is how concept of the writing system of this language was able to pass through the ages without having to learn the archaic Chinese pronunciation. You can read it, because that organization of knowledge is intuitive. It's the way knowledge is passed on. Emotion, to emote, is what moves one's heart. So what do you expect of heart radicals? Of course, it's telic. It's about emotion. Only a small set here is about palpating parts of the heart. Most of it here about emotion, state, mental state. This is exactly how Chinese character system or the writing system is organized. And this is why, so far, in East Asia, all the languages use Chinese as a lingua franca, because it's the most convenient way to represent your language. And this is why, historically, that you are able to use Chinese and read Chinese for all the Chineses in history, okay? Represents the basic concept-derived knowledge system, which is qualia, 4 causes, driven and consistent with common human experience, and independent of idiosyncratic features of individual language. And it's robust too. Let me give you one example. This is my study. Many of you didn't know this. Voice and sound, 声音. Actually, in Chinese, 声 and 音 used to do a dichotomy. Anything you said about 声 is production. 出声, 歌声, 大声. Anything you use about 音 is perception. 调音, 女高音, 浊音. And you think about it carefully, there's no exception. Okay, Japanese kanji follow this. But they have a different system, actually. In Japanese, 声 is anime, because in Japanese language, whether you have anime subject or inanimate subject is more important in the linguistic system. 声 here is animate. 音 is inanimate. So this is 龙音, the sound of the falls. 中音, the sound of the bell. In Chinese poetry, 夜半钟声到客船. You cannot say 中音. It's the source of production is the bell. In Japanese, 中音 is inanimate subject. But you can see that the system bends, but do not break. you use this kind of system, allowing you the robustness to represent the semantic contrast. Okay. Now, let's come back. This is what Andy mentioned earlier, actually, about the so-called hybridity of Chinese. So we're talking about these experience and concept-driven system that allow you to have robustness and then to cover different languages. Yet Chinese is changing. This is not influenced by English. Okay, I want to say emphatically, it's not influenced by English. English has not such a word as Q. English has not such a word as AAZ. No language in the world has anything such as AAZ. Okay? All these things are invented by Chinese, borrowing to some extent English alphabets. And what happens here is very interesting. I'm going to give the point here. It is violating your linguistic 101. It's violating the phonological integrity of Chinese. Number one, Chinese words are supposed to have tones. None of these have tones. Once you written down as an alphabetic word, the 粉丝 is different. 粉丝 that doesn't show in Andy's slides. Once you write it down a Chinese character, everything follows. But once you write it down as alphabetic characters, no tone, violating integrity. And where's Q? Chinese doesn't have the phoneme Q. You have been taught in phonology 101, whenever you introduce a new phoneme, the phonological system needs to change. Doesn't happen. Chinese has its robustness because you allow now a hybrid system. Whatever doesn't fit into the Chinese phonological system, you write it in English alphabets, which allow you to have this hybrid system. You allow you to have these two systems which seem to be allowing some hybridity in the language. So RQ, A Chen to EO get money, AAZ to go Dutch, to NG, coming from no-go, but the meaning is different. KTV, as I mentioned to you earlier, my Chinese teachers in the US saying that they have to teach their students to tell them that, in Chinese, it's KTV, it's not KTV. T has to be lower. It's part of Chinese system now, and there's no other way to say it, right? And then CCTV, you can't say any, all these things you don't know how to say it in Chinese. Violate autonomy of Chinese morphology, okay? But there's something strange happening. I originally said there's no tone, but some phonetician told me there's something funny going on. A Z is not A Z, a little bit of downstep. And if you know ABC, it's a little bit higher than XYZ. And Q is always high. And how about X Guang? Chinese doesn't have these kind of multisyllabic words, but X is multisyllabic. W, WTO. Oh, no, this is, I cannot pronounce it I'm not from China, I'm in China. WTO, right? You got a T has go very high. WTO. This is Chinese. You're thinking, this is written in alphabet. This is Chinese. There's something going on here that no one knows that actually violates the first rule of phonology that we are taught. A hybrid language is coming into place within a Chinese language. And then it comes in, follow phonological rules, morphological rules of Chinese, because you can say A car, B car, C car, D car, all the way to Z car. And then you have this one K, right? There's only one alphabet, but how many Ks are there in Chinese? You can la K. This refers to ketamine, K-zai, the ketamine, ecstasy. Anything involving ecstasy is a K. But you can K-su, hit the pool, but there's already KTV. And you can PK. A lot of people asking, where does PK come from? PK, every young people is PKing with someone all the time. It comes from, possibly, but no one knows, play to kill in games, video games, or actually penalty kick in soccer. But non-Chinese knows this. They just know how to PK. All right? And then LKK, again, as I say, not from Chinese. LKK from Taiwanese, Lao Kok Kok, senile. Many of us LKK people are here. 24K, 24K. But what does 24K mean? Gold, carat, kilometers on the highway. 24K, you have a driving instruction, you get stopped at 24K. There are many, many Ks you don't even know, and of course it's OK. Right? So how many Ks, and are they pronounced differently? All these actually are in the Chinese lexicon. You cannot compile a Chinese dictionary without alphabetic words now. Even the Xinhua dictionary have over 200 of them. I have my students extracted from corpus tens of thousands of examples containing alphabet in Chinese text. Summary. I'm giving you a conflict information. One is a very traditional one, saying that a semantic-driven, qualia-driven way allows Chinese to be strongly conceptual-driven, where actually it breaks the boundaries of language, because it is following Aristotle, that you are able to reorganize your knowledge in a very intuitive way. So in the semantic web, term of the web should be able to use that very effectively. On the other hand, you can see that Chinese itself internally becomes a hybrid language by introducing using of the alphabets. And for that, I would also argue that would allow Chinese to be a strong candidate for international language by being so adaptive, having such a hybrid representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Huang. Right, so maybe minimize it. And now may I invite Professor Tao Hongyin to address the topic, Globalization of Chinese, Teaching and Learning Chinese from a U.S. Perspective. Professor Tao, please.
Thanks goes to the organizers of the conference and also our technicians for organizing such a complex event. As someone who has spent the last couple of decades, over 2 decades, studying and teaching and working in the U.S., I would just like to present just one perspective, which is about the globalization of Chinese, from the U.S. perspective, especially concerning Chinese language learning and teaching. So the organizers proposed a huge, question about basically the status of Chinese, whether Chinese is going to be a major global, language. We all know what a global language means. So is Chinese there about to become a global language, and in what sense? In some senses, there is very encouraging science from the U.S. that there is something about the rising status of Chinese. So of course we can look at all kinds of statistics, numbers indicating the Chinese, the schools offering Chinese programs in the U.S. Maybe in the year 2000 you have something like 300, and in 2010 you have 1,600. That's a huge jump. And some newspapers, the media, the USA Today a few years ago published a paper, a news report, with the title, Chinese isn't the new French, it's the new English. So that's kind of the sentiment shared by many people. It's no longer just another foreign language. It's probably more than that. Locally, from UCLA, where I work, we have a very large Chinese language program, probably one of the largest in the U.S., even though not necessarily the largest in North America. But we regularly enroll over 1,000 students, accumulated over a year. And we offer a lot of classes from elementary all the way to advanced. And we also have kind of specialized courses for students with other needs, more advanced. So we offer professional, academic Chinese, and also something for our science and engineering students. Before they go to China, we have training for those students. So we offer quite a wide range of courses for different types of students. And actually, one of our students, I think his Chinese name is Kang Anzhu. He even won one of the top prizes at one of the Hanyu Qiao Chinese Bridge competitions. So on the screen, you increasingly frequently see students competing. They learn Chinese in China, competing at language competitions. They perform at popular shows, and they even speak dialects and non-standard, non-Mandarin dialects, and become very famous, well-known. They become local Chinese celebrities in sense. So you do see a lot of students learning Chinese and getting interested in learning Chinese and become popular language. But at the same time, I like to ring a very kind of cautionary note, what I call another reality check. In terms of for Chinese, to become a global, true world language, even as a foreign language in the U.S., there's a lot of catching up to do for Chinese. Why? If you look at the population in the U.S., the Chinese American population is something like 4 million. I think that's the most recent census survey. Out of something like 320, more than 320 million, that's the U.S. population. That's a small ethnic group we are talking about. And also, in terms of the foreign language enrollment, if you look at all the foreign language programs offered in the U.S., Chinese is growing, definitely. There's no question about that. But overall, let's take a look at some of the figures. This one is kind of old. It's a survey about foreign language enrollments in the U.S. from 1998 through 2002, so that's around 2002. So I'd like you to pay attention to the numbers here. So Chinese from 1998, the enrollment figure is 28,000, and in 2002, 34,000. So the increase rate is 20%. Sounds like a lot, but if you look at other languages, Spanish, 746,000, and Italian 63,000, and Japanese, is more, much more than, you have many more students enrolled in Japanese program than in Chinese. So that's what you might say, this is 2002, now we are in 2015. What about some recent figures? So another figure, this is done by the Modern Language Association of America. So you can see the numbers are pretty similar. In Chinese is number 7 or 8 or something like that. Always behind Japanese and all those European languages. Even though Chinese, if you look at the enrollment, percentage change, it's 18% increase, but still the number is smaller than Japanese. And that's up to for the numbers for up to 2009. Okay, let's look at the most recent survey that I've seen is the 2013 survey by the same MLA organization. They noticed something very interesting. In the U.S. College foreign language programs, there is an overall decrease by 6.7 decrease for across the board. Interestingly, only some of the languages have a positive increase rather than decrease. Among those, Korean is 44% increase. American Sign Language, Portuguese, Chinese 2% increase. So Chinese is not doing that bad. It's doing okay compared with other languages where you actually see a decrease, an overall decrease. But if you look at the specific numbers, again, even with 2% increase, and Japanese is a 7.8 decrease, Chinese is still behind the Japanese. And still, the overall pattern is very similar, since the numbers that have seen from 1998 all the way to 2013. So that tells us that, Chinese still has a lot of catching up to do, at least in the area of college level foreign language, enrollment programs. So of course, because China is such an important country, and there are a lot of government major initiatives to increase, the language and cultural exchanges between the U.S. and China. And of course, we know that China is very important. If you don't believe me, you can take a look at a video. Hopefully, it works. How important, American perceives China to be important. So how do we know? There is very vivid evidence.
Let's say China. 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 You go over to China. 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 You take China. China. China.
So I think we have enough of Donald Trump saying China. By the way, this is very good material for you guys, English teachers out there. If you want to know how many different ways of speaking China in American English, this is very good, authentic material. Okay, so all right. So because of the importance of China, in the eyes of Americans, at least in the eyes of the government, you can see that there are a lot of major government level initiatives. So a few years ago, President Obama proposed 100,000 strong initiative, meaning the aim was to send 100,000 US students to China, because US has so many Chinese students, so that the US government wants to send a lot of US students to China. So apparently this goal has reached. And just recently, in October, when President Xi Jinping visited the US, they had proposed a new initiative, which is 1 million strong. So now the new goal is to send 1 million US students to China for language and cultural exchanges. So so you can see that because of the importance, even though right now the enrollment in the Chinese student enrollment at college level is just relatively small, but there are a lot of major efforts being proposed and implemented to change the situation. But there are also problems. So not everything is as rosy, other than the enrollment. So for example, we talk about a lot of Confucius Institute, teachers, classrooms, and so on and so forth. But just a few years ago, I think in 2012, there were problems about questioning the teachers being sent to the U.S. What kind of status are they? Are they should be affiliated with the U.S. colleges, or should they go elsewhere? So they were talking about ideology, soft power, and so on and so forth. So there were a lot of suspicion, fear, even. Let's see. And at the university level, a lot of college campuses are talking about the state of the Confucius Institutes on university campuses. So one of the most well-known incident was the with regard to the University of Chicago, when they start to talk about renewing the contract with for the Confucius Institute. Because of a news report in China, they were mentioning something about the negotiation. Apparently, there were very strong stance expressed by the Hanban, and then the college professors from University of Chicago, they reacted very negatively. So they were talking about stopping, not to renew the contract. And similar things happened elsewhere. In this one is from Toronto, the Toronto School District. And locally, back home in Southern California, where I live, there were also controversies about Chinese language classes sponsored by the Chinese government. Of course, there are, I think, misunderstandings, fear, and confusion, and so on and so forth. So it's not always simple. You just send teachers there, offer free teaching materials, get students from America to China. It's not as simple as that. There's a lot of non-language related issues that popping up all the time. So we might want to ask, what went wrong? Will Americans really learn Chinese? Can Chinese, of course, here is the topic we are concerned with here. Can Chinese become a true global language in its truest senses? So these questions actually sound very familiar to me because a few years ago, the New York Times organized a panel. It's like a panel written forum talking about asking basically the same kind of questions. The whole theme of this panel was, will Americans really learn Chinese, given the strong interest at that time? That's the 2010, about 5 years ago. And somehow I was also got involved in this panel. So I while planning about this forum, I thought, why don't I just go back to that forum to see what people are talking about? There were a few panelists there from all different areas of the U.S. In different related professions. I don't want to repeat all the things they said. It's online. It's still available. But I like to take a quick survey. What I planned to do was to take a quick survey of my fellow panelists and see what they say about the strong interest in China. Will Americans continue to learn Chinese? Will this thing be a fad, or is it something one-time thing, or will it be a long-term thing? So I did a quick survey of those panelists, their responses to the paper, the New York Times, question. One, this is a very prolific author. She says that, parochial, and proud of it about, American society. So basically what she says is that because of lack of language capacity in the U.S. community, this is rooted in the much larger dumbing down of